In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a simple news scroller that basically scrolls through a bunch of images about news articles, that kind of thing. So to show you what we're working towards, here's a finished product. I'm going to preview this and I'll show you how it works. Basically, I've got 3 news items on here and it's going to show each one for 5 seconds and then it's going to appear to scroll to the next one. And then 5 seconds later, that's going to move to the next one. And that's going to display for 5 seconds and then it's going to go to the first one again. It's just going to scroll through those 3. Each of the one links to something else, and that's basically what we're going to do. So let's see how we can do that. I'm going to start from a completely blank page. Normally you would have your own styles or templates or whatever else and other information on here, but I want to make sure that we're focusing on just the stuff we're doing here. So I've removed all extraneous stuff. I've got a completely blank sheet to work from. So I'm going to insert the images first and then we'll work out how we're going to slide them out of view. So I'm going to use text boxes for these. The reason being that we're going to basically hide them by shrinking them down to nothing using an animation. And if you try shrinking down an image object, if I'd inserted images, that will actually scale the image object. So you see it's scaling down to nothing as opposed to sliding out, which isn't the effect we want. So we're going to use these text boxes. Now I have 3 images set up already that I'm going to use. Each of these is exactly 500 by 250. You need to have them all exactly the same size and you need to know what that size is because we need to make our text box exactly the same. So here's our text box and we are going to insert our image into that. So I'm going to double click to go into the editor and I'm just going to insert an image file. I'm going to select my first one. Now, if I was going to be reusing these in other places in the work area, I would probably want to import them into my toolbox as media objects. Here, these are pure one-off. I know that they're not going to be used anywhere else. So I'm just going to insert them as objects into this particular book page. So I'm going to insert that. Don't care about any of that information for now. And that inserts my image in here. Now I do want that to link to something. So the easiest way to do that is just to select that image again and go immediately to insert link. Here I give it a target and I'm going to give it a tooltip just to prove that it's pointing to different places. So this one is actually going to cdc.gov and I'm going to open it in a separate window. Okay, so that has done that. Now that doesn't look great because there's a bunch of things I need to do here. First of all, I need to hide my scroll bars. Very important. Don't forget to do that. The next thing is you can see that there's a bit of space around the edge here. That's because I have padding. I want to take the padding down to 0. And then finally, I want to make sure it's exactly the right size. So 500 pixels by 250 pixels. Okay. And that's it. Perfectly fitted. I can put it wherever I want it on the screen. I'll just leave it there. And always give it a useful name. So I'm going to call this one News 1. Okay, all good so far. Now I need 3 of these. So because I've already done all of those settings, I'm just going to copy and paste this one and then just replace the image and the link. So I'm going to copy, Control-C, Control-V, Control-V to give me 2 more. This one, News 2, I'm going to go into edit that. I'm going to make sure I delete everything in here, including the link, Control-A, delete. I'm going to insert my new image, which is this one. Same thing here. I'm going to give it a link. And then my third one. Okay, that gives me my 3 objects for my news items and they've got links on them. Now I need to make sure these are in the correct order. So it's going to go News 1, News 2, News 3. Because what we're going to do is we're effectively going to shrink this one down. We're going to shrink 1 down, which will reveal 2 underneath it. We'll shrink 2 down, which will reveal 3 underneath it. And then we're going to shrink 3 down, which is going to reveal a blank because we don't have anything in there. So I'm going to have to cheat here a bit. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to make sure that the first news item is always there in the very background. So I'm going to copy that, I'm going to paste it again, and I'm going to call this one, if I just move this out the way to here, start point just because when I move 3 out the way, I can't show 1 again because 1's on top of 3. So this is going to allow us to do that. So I'm going to select all of these because I want them all to be in exactly the same place. So I've selected 1, 2, 3, and then the background, and I'm going to left align and I'm going to top align. So they're all in exactly the same place. So far, so good. And to be careful, we're going to save at this point. I like to save often, just in case. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add our animations that's going to shrink each of those down to effectively nothing. Oh, before I forget, move my start point to the back. That's got to be at the back of everything. So I need to insert animations to basically shrink each of these down. So I'm going to insert an animation object. I'm going to put this in exactly the same place and make sure it's exactly the same size. Handily, it snaps to the size of the things behind it. This is going to be animation 1. Now, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to shrink each of these down, but then I'm going to have to expand them again so that I can display them when we cycle round from the beginning again. So I'm going to have to create collapse and expands for each of these. So I'll start with the expands because we're there already and it's the full size here. So I'm going to call this one expand image 1. Oh, sorry, expand news 1. Okay, and that is going to apply to the news 1 item. Okay, and it can last a second, that's fine. I don't really care, you're not going to see it. As long as this duration is less than the duration that each image displays for, then we're okay. So I've got my expand there, and then I'm going to have to repeat that a couple of times. So copy, paste, paste. This one will say now expand news 2, and that's going to apply to news 2. This last one is going to be expand news 3, and that's going to apply to news 3. The target object, what object this animation affects. Okay, and again, I'm going to make sure they all line up. Left align, top align, we're good to go. Okay, so that's the expands done. Now I need to do the collapse. So I'm going to take the same one again. Doesn't really, actually I'll take news 1, though it doesn't really matter which. Copy, paste. This is going to be my collapse, news 1. And this one I want to have a 0 width because that basically makes it invisible. So this is my collapse news 1. I'm going to have to copy, paste, paste. This is collapse news 3, that's collapse news 2. I just need to make sure that they're applying to the right object. So collapse news 1 is on 1, collapse news 2 is applying to news 2, and collapse news 3 is going to apply to news 3. Okay, and now we need to line those up as well. So I'll select those, select these ones, and then again I'm going to top align. But here I want them to right align because I need them to be along this edge because that's the way I want to shrink it. If you wanted them to wipe the other way, you could do a left align and they would all appear there. But for now, I'm going to right align. Okay, and now make sure all of that's moved back to where it should be. Okay, so far so good. Now the important thing is I need to trigger this. So at this point, I want to insert a time control. And that I'm just going to call slideshow. Okay, and what's going to happen is I'm going to have 3 things in here. After 5 seconds, I want to collapse news 1. On 10 seconds, I want to collapse news 2. And then on 15 seconds, I want to collapse news 3. Okay? So far, so good. And that will work for us. Okay, the other thing I need to make sure I do is the time control. I need to trigger that on the page loaded. So on the page, I'm going to go down to on page loaded, and I'm going to say, I'm going to start my slideshow. So that should now work. Let's try it and see what it looks like. Here's 1. 5 seconds later, it shows us 2. 5 seconds after that, shows us 3 for a count of 5, and then it should go back to the beginning. And then we're done. Okay, good. That is one loop through everything, and that works. And this is actually my background one again. Okay, that's what's being shown at the moment. So that is going to go through one cycle. Now I need to trigger another cycle. And I could basically do that on the time control. I could say on, after 20 seconds, start again. But what I'm going to do, just to show you something different, we're going to use events on these particular objects, or in fact on these animations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, as soon as news 3 finishes, I want to start again. So what I'm going to do here is, as soon as number 3 finishes being displayed, I effectively want to start my slideshow again. Okay, so this is good. So far, so good. It's basically going to move each of those out of the way. Now we need to add the code that's going to move them back so that we can reuse them. We've got the restart, but at the moment they're still all shrunk down. So again, I'm going to use the actions on these particular things here. So as soon as news 1, the collapse news 1 finishes, so on finish, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide it. So news 1, I'm going to hide it because I don't want to see what happens next. Because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to expand news 1. Okay, so what this is going to do, as soon as news 1's collapse, it's effectively going to hide it, expand it again, so it's ready to be displayed and then collapsed again. Okay, and we'll worry about how it gets displayed again in a minute. So that's what we're going to do on that one. Okay, now let's go to news 2. As soon as news 2 has finished, again, what we want to do is we want to hide news 2, and then we want to expand news 2. So that's ready to go again. Similar thing for news 3, almost. Here we don't want to hide it because what we're going to do is we're immediately going to reset things at the end of this, and we're going to start again because we're starting the slideshow. So I'm not going to hide news 3, but I do need to expand news 3 again. Okay, so I need to make sure that news 3 is expanded. I also want to show news 1 again, and I want to show news 2 again, because again, at the end of the third one, we're resetting everything so we can start again. So news 2, I'm going to show that one, and then that should be good. And then we start the slideshow again. So I'm going to save that, and let's preview that and see how that looks. So this displays pointing to cdc.gov. After 5 seconds, it switches to this one, which is pointing to sap.com. 5 seconds later, this one, which is events.sap.com. 5 seconds after that, it flips back to the start, and it starts again. 5 more seconds, it will go to the next one. And then 5 seconds after that, it will go to number 2 again, and so on forever. Okay? And that is it done. All right? That's really all you need to do to get a news scroller working. I'm going to do one more thing to this just to make it a bit nicer and a bit more traditional. But if that's all you want to see, you can stop the video here and we're all good. One thing I'll point out, these animation objects tend to just get in the way of everything else on the screen, and you can't really see anything else. You're just staring at a blue box, which isn't particularly interesting. Now, every object has a layer. And for animation objects, the layer is not really important. It doesn't matter. With the other stuff, it does, as we'll get into in a minute. But for all of these, I can just move all of these out of the way down here, because I don't really need to see any of these objects blocking my content. So I'll move those out the way. Now I can see my content. They're still there. They're just out of the way where I don't need to look at them. Okay, so now on to the next part. What I want to do is I want to have those little buttons at the bottom which show which news item you're looking at. This is handy so that users know how many news items there are, and they can also see when it's looped back to the start. So let's look at how we can do that. I'm going to use just little circles for that. And I'm going to put them down at the bottom here. Let's shrink this down to, say, about this size. Looks good. Okay, so I need to set those up to the right color. I want them white, and I don't want a border on them. Okay, so that's just going to give me a little white dot that I can use. And I'm going to call this one Active 1. Okay? And that's going to say that news item 1 is active at the moment. That's the one you're looking at. So now I actually want 3 of those. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste it. And I'm just going to align those on the top. Okay, so I've now got active 1, active 2, active 3. So that's going to show us which news item is active. I now need ones to show which one's inactive. So I'm going to copy all 3 of those again and create new copies of them. Perfect. Okay, so these ones, these are the inactive ones. So for these, I'm going to use a light grey. And just for the fun of it, I'm going to set the opacity to 50%, which means you'll see some of the background in there. Again, this is how websites tend to do it, so let's look at the same way they've got it. So now I need all of these to line up, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the inactive ones, and then the active ones layered over the top of that, but I'm only going to show one active one at a time. So I need to get these on top of those. So I'm going to select those, then I'm going to select these, and I'm going to go to top align. Okay, so now they're on top of each other. All right, I'm going to move that just to about there, I guess. Okay, now remember I said that the order of the layering is important. I have my, oh, sorry, I didn't rename these. I want the active ones to be above the inactive ones. I'm going to put them above each of the relevant numbers. You don't have to, as long as the active is above the inactive, that's fine. I could just as easily have active 3, active 2, active 1 here, and then the inactive ones over. It doesn't matter in this case. Now, by default, all of the inactive ones I want displayed, but the active, I only want to show one of those depending on which news item I'm on. So what I'm going to do there is use one of my favorite features, which is object visibility. And what I'm going to do here is call this one show active item. And this is going to have 3 objects in it, which is my active 1, active 2, active 3. Now, what an object visibility does, if you've not seen the previous videos on this, is it will display only one of those at a time. So as soon as you say, okay, go and display object 1, it will hide 2 and 3. Now we need to just trigger which one of those is going to be active. So first of all, I need to make sure that when we start up and we've got our first news item, the active 1 is displayed. So I'm just going to add that to the timer. Because I could add it to the on-page loaded, but I may as well add it to the timer because we're running that as soon as we load the page anyway. So I'm going to say at 0, I want to show my active item, and I want to activate number 1, which is going to be this first white dot right here. Okay, and the other 2 will automatically be hidden. I don't need to hide them, select their hide property, because that's all part of the genius of what a display object visibility control does. So now I need to flip to the other ones. And again, I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to use the onComplete events for these things. So as soon as news 1 is complete, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, the next item that's going to be shown is actually item 2. So I want to activate the second one of these. Okay, so that's active 2 there. So I'm going to do the same thing with the next one. So on collapse news 1, we just set that up to show active 2. So on collapse news 2, I'm going to show the next one, which is active 3. And then on news 3, we're cycling back to the beginning again. So here I am going to activate 1 again. And that should be good. So save it again. And let's see what that has done for us. So here's the first one, and 1 is shown there as active. The other 2 are grayed out. Go to the next one. Number 2 is now shown as active, and here's my page. Now, then I go to 3, that one's active, the other 2 are grayed out, and then it's going to cycle back to the beginning again, and we just continue. Perfect. So that is it. That's how all of this works. That's how to set one of these up. I will stop that there. And that's how to set up a nice simple news scroller. So I hope you found that helpful. Thanks for watching, and make sure you follow us on YouTube. Thank you.